Hello, fellow humans. Chris here again. So today I wanted to talk about my signature. Don't be afraid to question the consensus. I want to do this because with the current climate that we're in right now, in particular with the issue of vaccines and current resurgence in COVID cases, it kind of got me to thinking about that phrase, and I really want to clarify what it means to me, because I was also looking back in some of my older videos, and there was a comment that came up that was kind of questioning me on what consensus do I question. And I think at the time it was in reference to a video that I did about asking the right people the right questions and using sources, using references, and even leaning on people who are smarter or more experienced or more well-read in a particular subject than you are. And to this person, I guess they felt that I was some sort of a hypocrite because I was yielding in a general sense, and in this case in particular, I think it had to do with masks. This was pre-vaccination, but you could apply it just as much today. The idea that I believe in the consensus of the medical community that vaccines work. You look at the numbers, you look at the hospitalization rates amongst vaccinated and unvaccinated. It's a no-brainer to me. It's just like I accept the vast consensus of the scientific community that climate change is real, it is man-made, and it is a major threat to our environment. I agree with the scientific consensus on that. Why I wanted to bring this up was I think that there is at least potential to misinterpret what I mean when I say don't be afraid to question the consensus. So to explain it, I want to just backtrack a little bit. When I first started this podcast, and that's all it was at first, was a podcast. There was no YouTube channel. And it was under the 10th man. And the principle was the 10th man rule, which is, in summary, in short, the responsibility of the 10th person, as it were, in the room. If 9 people agree on a particular subject, it is the responsibility of that 10th person to disagree with that consensus. But really, I guess maybe a better word for that is to question. And what that means is to not assume that a principle or an idea is correct simply because everybody agrees with it. If you know the story of The Emperor's New Clothes, I think that's a pretty apt summation of sort of the idea of it. 12 Angry Men, that was actually a movie that I reviewed last year, also is a good example of that. So anyway, the idea is question the consensus. As George Carlin put it succinctly, question everything. And that's really what it means. When I say don't be afraid to question the consensus, I mean check your sources. If somebody is telling you that this is the truth, don't take their word for it. Look into it. Read up on it. Take multiple sources from different places that have different breadths of knowledge and experience. It's not to say, hey, vaccines are stupid, masks don't work, COVID is fake news, simply because one person told you that, whether that's a media outlet or a former and disgraced president, or Tucker Carlson, or whoever it is feeding you a line of bullshit. Don't decide that, hey, we want to question groupthink, right? So hell, the entire medical community might say that masks work, vaccines are effective, but hey, I'm not going to just agree with all of them blindly. I'm going to be my own person. That's not what questioning the consensus is. Questioning the consensus is, hey, that's a great theory, but are you sure? What about this? What about this? Reading up on the subject and researching to the extent possible. Now, this is done under the understanding that you are not personally coming to all these conclusions by your own accord of research. And I say research because I think that that's one of the most misused and misunderstood words in social media. Googling something is not research. The information that you are obtaining by Googling it is secondhand research, in that that was researched when it was done. You're reading what other people have verified. So that's where it's kind of important to know your sources, verify where it came from. When I talk about things like right-wing versus left-wing violence, I'm looking up. I'm looking up credible sources, institutions. Same thing with the CDC when you're looking up information on vaccinations. I read congressional records, if I want to see a certain trend of how people voted in a certain case. I think back to when I first enlisted in the military. In basic training, they talked about being a follower, and that you can't be a good leader until you are an effective follower. And being a follower means trusting and listening to people who are smarter and who have more experience than you. It's not a weakness. It's not making you a sheep. It means that you are effectively taking information from credible sources and applying it to your reality and coming up with a well thought out and educated take. For me personally, I as I acknowledged many times, this is not a news channel. This is an editorial. It's my opinion, and I have biases, and I have my own personal beliefs and ideals that play into a lot of my takes. But to the greatest extent possible, I try to present the facts as I understand them, my interpretation of them, and then apply my thoughts on those facts. But I try as best as I can to use the truth and facts as the basis for my opinions. This is why on occasion I will stumble upon a Ben Shapiro video or Steven Crowder or that Australian dude, Contrarian Dude, and I might be compelled to do a response video because not because I disagree with their opinion, but because I take issue with the horribly unsound and just frankly asinine logic that they use for their opinions. This happened with Ben Shapiro when he didn't know the definition of felony murder. This happened with Contrarian Dude when he didn't know what Beau of the Fifth Column was talking about. He didn't know what country he was referring to. He didn't even get like basic principles of the points that he was making. Those are the things that I tend to go after when I engage in these kinds of videos and takes. So I just wanted to make that clear. I hope that kind of explains a little bit more in depth about what questioning the consensus means, and so that it's understood that I'm not a hypocrite if I take the word of the scientific community or the medical community, or if you were in a position of power over, Like, let's say you were the commander-in-chief, just for example, and you had subject matter experts like, oh, I don't know, maybe generals in the field, that you would typically yield to their advice because they have a point of reference that is far exceeds anything you've even come close to experiencing. And that is the responsible citizen's responsibility is to siphon through those different sources, seek out those experts, and listen to them, and humble yourself so that you can allow yourself to question not only the consensus, but your own beliefs and biases, and coming to a personal conclusion. And again, questioning the consensus in a lot of ways is also just questioning yourself. And that's why you'll notice the book that I'm reading on my channel's profile picture is called Confirmation Bias. That's not a coincidence that I picked that book. That is a theme that I talk about quite a bit. And I personally am subjected to it as well. And this is something that I talk about, that yes, I am an imperfect human, and I'm not infallible, and I have biases. And those can and do play into and influence your takes on things. So that, in a nutshell, is a very long-winded explanation or attempt at an explanation of what I mean when I say, don't be afraid to question the consensus. Having said that, please leave me a comment if you have any questions or clarifications on anything I said. I know that I can ramble, and sometimes maybe I say a bunch of stuff that makes sense in my head but doesn't make any sense to anybody coming out. So let me know if you need me to clarify anything, or if you have any questions. And it's obviously good for the algorithm, so I always appreciate a thumbs up and a comment. And subscribe if you want to hear more of what I have to say. But anyway, I will leave it at that. I will be catching up with you all again very soon. Have a great rest of your day. And remember, don't be afraid to question the consensus.